day of my book launch. And so today was the first day of the book launch. Follows and likes this All That I'm Worth. It was 1 year in the making, and all of the amazing people that contributed to this book. I'm so grateful for each and every one of them. And so today from 6 o'clock this morning, maybe 7, I have been doing each hour, or maybe a little longer, chapter by chapter. And so today I'm going to end with chapter 8, responsibility. And after chapter 8, responsibility, I am going to give you the story of Ana Olivero. She is an amazing Latina Dominican woman who is now a pediatrician in the Bronx. And her story brings us back to just after the time of Trujillo in the Dominican Republic and the fight for democracy. She's just an amazing lady. So I'm excited to share that story with you. And you can read the whole story in the book, Follows and Likes. Is This All That I'm Worth? And I have to pin it to the bottom of Instagram right now because I forgot. But you can also go into Barnes & Noble or Amazon and type in Follows and Likes, Is This All That I'm Worth? And you will be able to get it there. So with that being said, chapter 8 of the book is responsibility. And for young people, even adults, responsibility is really important because it's just one of those things that we often forget, that we try and put being responsible and blame on other people or on other things. And so that's why this chapter is so important, because even today in our society, young people watch adults blame others, and the greatest example is our presidents. It was, first it's Trump's fault, and then it was Obama's fault, and then it was Bush's fault, and then it was somebody else's fault before that, and it's Clinton and so that's one great example of what it is to not take responsibility. And so when we have young people watching others blaming society, coronavirus, whatever it might be, for their lack of, responsibility, I think that this is probably one of the most important chapters for young people and for parents. So I'm going to read the beginning, and just like every other chapter, there is an important quote at the beginning of each chapter. At the beginning of this chapter is a quote by Les Brown. Love Les Brown. If you don't know who Les Brown is, then I highly suggest that you look him up, because he is an incredible motivational and inspirational speaker. So he says, accept responsibility for your life. Know that it is you who will get you where you want to go, and no one else. It's not your teacher's fault. It's not your parents' fault. It's not your whomever's fault it is. It's not the situation where you grew up. It's not any other person's fault. Because one thing that someone said once, and I'm pretty sure it was JT Fox, he said, it's not your fault that you were born in poverty or you're born broke. However, it is your fault if you die broke. And that might sound a little harsh, right? But ultimately, we have the tools. And if you look at each story in this book, each of these people, okay, they grew up in an extreme situation. Some, it may not have been poverty, many of them were, but they did not end up that way. And these are only the stories in this book. It has nothing, and there's multiple other ones. So Like he said, might be born that way. Might be not, you can't choose what situation you are born into. However, throughout life, you can choose and accept the opportunities, like Greg Walker when we talked about him, all of them. Naveen Jain, Anjanita Prevost, Jen Welter, Barbara Majeski. Who else did we talk about today? Herb Lang, Altagracia Pierre Outerbridge. Those are the people that we talked about today. Mike Pugliese. And now we're talking about Ana Olivero. And so they were not born into an ideal situation, but they are not going to die in that situation. They have taken the opportunities and recognized them and took responsibility for who they are. So, with what Les Brown was saying in this quote, accept responsibility for your life. Know that it is you who will get you where you want to go and no one else. Only you have the ability to get you where you want to go. So, responsibility in today's world, even on the smallest level, seems to be lacking in a tremendous way. I see this most in young people that I have worked with throughout the years, and the trend seems to be getting worse instead of better. Unfortunately, we live in a world where making excuses is accepted and where parents allow their children to get away with being irresponsible by making excuses themselves. You may remember a time when you chose not to study for an important test or left an assignment until the very last minute, knowing you would fail or not receive a good grade. However, you still decided not to be responsible and chose not to do it. Why? Why did we do that? A lot of times it's because in the back of our mind, we know that there is some way to get out of having to do it in that moment. Or there's something we can say to ourselves that will justify not doing that task, even as adults. So there's someone else we can blame it on in that moment. Or your mom or your dad will advocate for you to give you another chance. Why should you have another chance? Whether you're a child or adult, why should you have another chance when you consciously chose to not to do the responsible thing, which would have been to study for the test, do the assignment, show up for work, whatever it might be? Do you think your parents are helping you by swooping in to save the day for your lack of responsibility? Absolutely not. And parents that are doing this are sending a clear message to their child that they don't need to be responsible. So, in this chapter, the important part is responsibility. And this chapter is just as important for young people as it is for parents. Okay? Because as an educator for over 20 years, I have seen parents come in with more excuses than I would like. So when a parent does this for a child, it does much more harm than good. First, you're being taught that if you choose to be irresponsible, then there aren't any consequences. While not studying for a test or doing an assignment may not seem overly detrimental, in the long term, imagine if that were a task your boss asked you to accomplish at work. And I always say that to my students. It might be an assignment for me, but what if I was your boss and you had to turn in this presentation or whatever it might be because I needed it to present to someone else? You'd be fired, right? Mommy and daddy aren't going to come to your work and say, oh, but he wasn't really feeling good last night, right? It's about starting with that responsibility at a young age. So are you going to bring your mom and dad to work to explain why you didn't complete it on time? No, of course you're not. Your boss is going to fire you. And then you will most likely make an excuse and put the blame on your boss or someone else because in your mind, it couldn't possibly be your fault, could it? We see it, I see it. right? So technically, if you've never been held accountable or needed to be responsible for your actions because someone always came in and saved the day, then in reality, it's not completely your fault. However, the day is going to come where you will have a very rude awakening for your lack of responsibility. And hopefully, by reading this or listening to this right now, you will understand. So, I'm going to leave the next example for you to have to read on your own. So, you're going to have to get the book, Balance and Likes. Is This All That I'm Worth? Just came out today on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, is published through Barnes and Noble Press. And so you see pinned at the bottom on Instagram right now that there is the link there. You see scrolling at the bottom of the screen on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and on YouTube right now. It's scrolling at the bottom of the screen. That's where you can get it. Because I'm telling you, this book is going to change a lot of young people's lives. And it's not because I wrote it. Has nothing to do with that, but I'm very loving and I'm very passionate about this topic. So you will see that, or if you haven't seen it already. So now I want to go to the story that comes after the chapter responsibility. It's Dr. Ana Olivero, being responsible for the path you take. And her quote, which is a quote at the beginning of every chapter from the person whose story it is, and if you want to hear the full interview with her, you can go to my podcast, The Secret to Success Isn't So Secret podcast, and you can listen to it there. Sometimes your parents will not support your choices. They will even tell you it's not possible because they don't think you have what it takes. Don't let this hold you back. When my father doubted my ability to be a doctor, it just made me want to do it even more, just to prove him wrong. And I did. I'm actually grateful for his disbelief and lack of confidence in me because it pushed me to prove him wrong and be who I am today. And that is from Dr. Ana Olivero, who is now a pediatrician in the Bronx for Ola Pediatrics. So her story is one that may not be often heard of when thinking of growing up. We often hear of challenges like poverty, hunger, abuse, homelessness. However, her story is one of being a child caught in the middle of two political parties and living in fear that her uncles and mother would end up in jail or even worse, dead. Anna was born in a beautiful part of the Dominican Republic in the area of Barahona in a small town called Tamayo. She has fond memories of watering the roses, sitting for coffee in the afternoon with the neighbors, and the love that she received from her family. However, her childhood would be a tumultuous one, as she was also part of a family divided by political views and ideology that shaped her life forever. Anna's grandmother had many children, and she instilled in her children that they be educated. Her two eldest uncles both had university degrees, and one was an engineer, and the other one was completing his studies as an anesthesiologist. These two men were the great hope for Anna's family, but one of them was the first person to own a car in the town that she grew up in. So you were talking back in the 60s, okay? She remembers how everyone would run to the windows when he drove by because they had never seen a car before. However, Civil War came to the Dominican Republic and her two uncles disappeared traveling back home from Santo Domingo to Tamayo, never to be seen or heard from again. They vanished. After the Civil War, when Anna was around the age of 5, she moved to Santo Domingo with her mother, her aunt, her uncles, the younger brothers of those that disappeared, and her two cousins who were orphans after their fathers were gone. Anna's parents were divorced, and so her mother took it upon herself to be the provider of the family, to bring a better life and more opportunities to them. Her mother worked and studied. However, the problem was is that Anna's father was on the political side of the old government, the more how would you say dictator government. Okay, but her mother and brothers were on the democratic side. They were for democracy and getting rid of the dictatorship government. So could you imagine being a child in a home where there is political unrest between both, and police officers would come in the middle of night, and they would looking for her uncles who were against the government at that time in the Dominican Republic. Her story is an incredible story. And so, like I said, you can get the book, Follows and Likes, Is This All That I Am Worth? And you can get it at Barnes & Noble or Amazon, and you can read her whole story, and also you can even hear more in detail the story on my podcast, The Secret to Success Isn't So Secret podcast. And so this ends my first day of my book launch of Follows and Likes Is This All That I'm Worth. Again, please, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, you can go and click the link or the link tree in my bio. You can click the link that's attached to some of the to the descriptions, and you can choose to order the book through Amazon, who is the publisher, or I'm sorry, through Barnes & Noble, who is the publisher, or Amazon, whichever you prefer. So with that being said, this is the end of the first day of my book launch for Follows and Likes, Is This All That I'm Worth? And join me again tomorrow, and we will be going with chapters 9 through 17. Oh my goodness. And tomorrow we will start with empathy and tolerance. So I hope you enjoyed today, and I am looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow again. So